Have you ever felt so desperate that you just wanted to give up on life? You experienced a loss maybe a few days ago that has just stunned you and shocked you and put you in this pit of grief and you don't know what to do with it. Or maybe it was a loss a year ago or 2 years ago and you've never really processed that. You've never found joy again. Well, I've been there, and I want to share with you some things that people have taught us, our heroes, or those who we get to work with at Spark of Life. We finished our 120th retreat just a few days ago in Alaska, and there's this man there that just changed my life. He doesn't even know it, and he shared the story about his cocaine addiction and his overall suckiness of life. He was not a good person according to his own view about himself, and he was so desperate he was ready to give up on life. And he finally got to the point where he looks back on that stage of his life, and he calls it the gift of desperation. Now, that's pretty hard words to say to somebody in despair because nobody wants to go there. You've been desperate. And to look back on life and call it a gift of desperation means that you've come through it and you're experiencing a joy that you thought you'd never have again. Well, that's what Bob shared with me. There are 3 choices I want to share with you today that are healthy choices that can help you find hope again, even though you're in despair at the moment. The first thing is to make a choice to give yourself a season of grief. We call it deep grief crap. I try to keep from grieving because it hurts so badly. It just rips everything out of me. It causes that despair feeling. But the gift of desperation can come to you, this feeling, this thought that it's a gift because it's propelled you and hasn't defeated you, by making a choice to say it's okay to feel hopeless. It's okay to go to the pit of grief. It's okay to be there. I don't want to stay there though. If I stay there, I'll debilitate, I'll hurt other important relationships of my life that I want to keep, and I'll give up the pursuit of joy again. Jesus was about to die, and he had a desperate spirit. He was so desperate that in the garden, in the night they came to arrest him and he was headed toward the cross, he had a season of desperation. He had given up being with the Father. He had come to this earth to save human beings, to save people like you and me. He's about to die for the sins of the world. And he takes 3 people with him. He takes 3 people with him. And those 3 people are Peter, James, and John, and they've shown weak faith. And he's going to pray, and he says, I want you to keep watch and pray. And he says, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. His soul was overwhelmed with sorrow. He was in the despair pit. He had a sense of desperation. He had never died before. He had never been separated from his Father. He's about to enter a realm of darkness that's so dark none of us can understand it, and he couldn't even grasp it all. He was desperate. He was so desperate that he prayed that the cup would pass from him. I don't want to die, he told his Father, with whom, before the world began, knew he had to come to this earth and die. But he had a broken heart. And he's about to undergo a drama, a death, an experience that he had never experienced before, and he was desperate. Now, let me ask you this. If the Son of God can be desperate, if the Son of God can grieve, and he did grieve, he was asking the Father to do something that he knew the Father couldn't do. To save us, the Father had to let the Son die. You talk about desperation. So when you're so desperate and you hit that pit of grief and you're in that pit and you feel like you can never breathe the fresh air out of the pit, well, the Son of God felt it. You know, folks, we have to go there. You have to be desperate. You have to go to the pit. But I want you to remember number 2, the choice you can make to allow yourself to grieve deeply and to be desperate without giving up on yourself is a gift. I'm telling you, it's a gift. You have a choice to make. I'm going to allow myself to go there. I'm going to experience that grief. I don't like it, but I know this. I don't want you to stay there. I don't want to stay there, because then everything else goes to crap. Relationships that I want to keep can be hindered. You don't want to go there. And so give yourself permission to choose to be desperate and to not beat yourself up for it. And number two, choose to get some help. I've already referenced Jesus. This is the second point. First point, choose to have a season of grief, and I can't tell you how long that lasts. And the second point is choose to get some help. Now, this is kind of ridiculous that I'm saying this, because I'm saying this, if you're watching this video, unless somebody, forced you to watch it, you chose to get some help. You chose to watch this video. Jesus chose to get some help. His help came from three men who were weak in faith and who are about to desert him. He chose three flawed human beings to keep watch while he prayed on the most significant night of his life. He reached out for help. I'm amazed at this. I'm amazed at Jesus asking weak, sinful men for help. There's something about that story that just resonates with me. Sometimes I need help. At Spark of Life, our goal, our mission as an organization is to walk beside people in their grief journey. So, and what do we want to do? We want to encourage them. This video is to encourage you not to quit. We want to equip you with strategies that can actually help you. We have retreats on our website, sparklife.org. And I want you to know, in every single retreat, we see people in desperation come to have hope by Sunday. And what it means is they have hope not to quit on life, and they have hope to fill their hearts with joy again. It's a journey. It's a hard journey, but we know it's possible. We want to help you. We have an online course if you cannot come to a retreat or don't want to. An online course has everything in the online course that the retreat has. You can start today with that. We have coaches standing by who's all been desperate. They've all been in a season of desperation, and they've all found hope. Third point, I want you to do this. Choose to encourage another human being today. Choose to encourage another human being today. Pick out one person to write a short email to and encourage them, because maybe they're struggling. We had a couple who came to a retreat a few years ago whose son had taken his life by suicide. You talk about desperation, they were there. On Thursday, as we shared our stories about why we came to that retreat, that grief retreat, she shared with us about her son's death, about how she had crawled up in a hole, how she was in fetal position for a year, how she couldn't even get up before noon, how her life was, that she had been lower than she had ever been before. She had hit the bottom of the pit, and then she thought it couldn't get worse, and then it did get worse. Have you been there? You might be there right now, and you say, well, if I couldn't make it here, how can I make it here? You talk about desperation. And she said, after about a year and a half of that, I couldn't keep living like this. And so I was so desperate, I got up and I sought help. Her husband was sitting next to her, and I called him Bob, and Bob said, I'm at this retreat only because I love my wife. She wanted me to go. I've given up a long time ago. I will never be happy again. I'll never have joy return to my life. So on Sunday, this man came to me before everybody was leaving. The retreat was over. And he came up to me and he said, David, I don't want you to think you wasted your time on me this weekend. I have found hope to live forward. And he's crying as he's telling me this. He gives me this big hug. He found hope. You think he still had bad days, bad weeks? Yes. You think he misses his son to this moment? Yes. Do you think he gets sad? Yes. But now when he thinks of his son, he smiles. And he thinks of the good things about his son. He's living forward with hope. And you know why he found hope? Because he was honest that first night, and he told us of his despair. He even told us that he didn't think he'd ever get well again. That's where he was. He didn't hide those emotions. He didn't even know he was doing what he needed to do to get to hope by being honest and with raw honesty. He was angry as he said those words. He was pointing his crooked little finger at me. It doesn't matter what you do, David. I will not get better. He was being honest. He gave himself permission to have that season of grief. All he needed to do was change his thinking that those feelings of despair does not mean He's hopeless and helpless. There is hope for him. You know what he did? A second thing, he got some help. You say, well, he didn't want to be there. Well, nobody forced him to come. Deep down, he wanted help. Deep down, he was too afraid to even admit there's a possibility of hope. Have you been there? And what he was doing without even realizing it was in a healthy recovery because he felt so crappy. He chose to get help even though he didn't realize he was trying to get help. And the third thing he did is the most important thing. He loved his wife. The reason he came was because of her. He was giving of himself to her. You know what happens at a Spark retreat? You know what happens? Why do people go from despair to hope in 3.5 days? Because there's other people there that they start thinking of. It's not all about their loss. It's also about somebody else's loss. Now, for a while, grief overwhelms us. We can only think about our loss. That's normal. That's natural. Stop beating yourself up for it. You're not being selfish. You're grieving. And for a while, that loss consumes us, and everything about our life is about that loss. Everything. And then you meet somebody, and that person's hurting too. And you reach out to them, and you hear their story, and then you want to help them. And suddenly, your mind shifts from all about you, and that, again, is not selfish. It's called grief, to somebody else. And for just a moment, you're thinking of their loss, not yours. And sometimes when we experience horrific loss, what happens is all our thoughts and all our energy, every waking moment is about what we lost. And in the process, we forget what we have. Well, he had his wife and he loved her. It was a sweet love. He did that which he didn't want to do for the sake of his wife. And then at the retreat, he had 2 partners at the retreat. He had 2 partners. He heard their lost stories. They became real tight, those 3 men in their little group. And he started reaching out to those other 2 guys and helping them and saying, I'm here for you. He started thinking of others. And when he did that, it's not all about my loss. And hope starts to inch closer and closer and closer. So today I want you to speak words of life to another human being. So you're on your computer or your phone, so watching this. So when this video is over, I want you to pick out one person in your life to speak words of life into, and do it with an email or a text. Do that today so you can choose to be in a season of grief. You can admit it. It's okay. You can choose to get some help. You've done that. You can choose to get further help. And number 3, you can choose to love somebody today and speak words of life into them with an email, a text, or a phone call. You can love somebody else. And here's the deal about grief. We grieve because we loved. How do we get out of grief? Well, they'll stay with us forever. But how do we get out of debilitating grief? How do we live forward with our grief and with our pain? By the same way we got into it. We love. We got into grief because we love. We start to breathe the fresh air and recover in a healthy way and live forward with joy again by loving. By loving. Love somebody today. 3 ways to get the gift of desperation. At Spark of Life, we believe there's always hope. We believe that there's hope. So contact us at sparkoflife.org. We're not ashamed to say it. We want to walk beside you. We have retreats coming up, both online and in person. We have an online course you can access today. And we've got coaches ready and willing and able to help you on this journey of grief. At Spark of Life, there is always, always hope.